Welcome everybody, Sheldon here with Data Systems Architecture. This is the second video in our series discussing advanced concepts for data systems and the architecture of data systems. And we're going to be talking about a pretty boring buzzword called domain-driven design. So we've probably heard about domain-driven design, but from the concept from the perspective of an architect, there are certain responsibilities that are unique to our skill set and our role within an organization that make this especially relevant. And I think that architects should really be spearheading domain-driven design efforts. The motivation for domain-driven design is how can we deliver software products with an optimal balance of cost, reliability, flexibility, and expediency of development. And this is a methodology which covers the entire software lifecycle. So we're not just talking about the business requirements. We're not just talking about the which type of database we're going to use or what programming language. We're talking about the entire lifecycle, including who's going to work on it and all this kind of stuff. And so we're aligning the needs of the entire organization with the design of the software. There are two phases in domain-driven design. First, the strategic design, where we create a framework for analyzing business needs, and we refine the domain problem that the software is going to solve. So we take a business need and we say, how are we going to write software to hone in and solve that problem? And it's really important that everybody in the organization agrees on what that exact need is and the general concept of how the software is going to solve that problem. And I think that includes the software engineers that you work with. They don't necessarily need to be part of these discussions, but they need to be aware of what is the purpose of the application, who's the end user, and what are they trying to do with it. Because there may be trade-offs that they make while they are implementing their code that may not fit the needs of the company, right? So for example, optimizing specific kinds of queries versus others, or setting up a schema one way or versus another. All of these technical decisions are really driven by the domain. I mean, this is literally the name of the whole system here. So, and when we're in strategic design phase, this is when we start making the higher level architectural decisions about what kind of tech we're going to use and what programming language and which projects are going to work out, what are the different components of the system, and what's the long-term vision of the product. And then as we start getting closer to the implementation phase, we work through tactical design, where we really start defining the low-level implementation details for each of the separate components, and then think about how all of those components are going to work together and what their specific needs are. So the architect has a lot of responsibility in this process. I believe the architect is a leader of this process because the architect needs to develop the specific knowledge about the domain so that they can understand what the business requirements are, what do the customers do with the software, and that will drive all of the decisions about the technology and about everything related to the software. And there needs to be an understanding of what kind of resources can we put into it. How does this fit into the bigger picture of the company? How important is this project versus other projects going on at the company? We need to understand the technical debt that we have in our existing systems, because or if this is going to incur additional technical debt, we need to be aware of that as well. And during this process, we also need to be working with engineers very closely, understanding where their pain points in their existing projects, how would a new project or a new integration with their system have an impact on them, and what are their preferences? What kind of tech do they like to use? Do they like one language or another? Or do they like using one cloud provider over another? It's important that your developers feel like they're being heard and that they are involved in providing feedback about these kinds of decisions. So the role of the architect is just so multifaceted in domain-driven design, because you should be engaging at every level of the organization, as well as understanding any vendors that you're working with, their motivations, or customers and what they need. And this is how we design successful long-term data systems, is through domain-driven design. So please continue watching additional videos in the series so that we can have a bit of a foundation for some of the other concepts discussed in this channel. And I will see you in another video.